Good evening, I'm Andrew Chang. Adrian is on assignment. Tonight, from climate change to the armed forces, a new cabinet for urgent Canadian problems.
I am thorough, I am determined, I am results-oriented.
We'll look at the women at the top. Plus, Rosie and Adishu are here. Also tonight, Iqaluit identifies the source of its contaminated drinking water, why the problems run deeper.
I really hope they get this fixed as soon as possible.
BC announces boosters for everyone 12 and up. And a Japanese princess defies tradition and marries for love.
This is like Japanese version of Harry and Meghan's story.
Why she's trading Tokyo for New York. This is The National. In so many urgent ways, Canada is at a pivotal moment. Pandemic economic recovery is ramping up. Ottawa's relationship with Indigenous peoples is fragile. The climate and military leadership are in crisis. And this is the revamped team the Prime Minister has chosen to tackle it all. 39 cabinet ministers, including himself, many of them new or now in new roles. The cabinet is once again gender balanced, but beyond that, what is notable, women hold several of the top jobs. David Cochrane takes us through it.
Anita Anand's first duty in cabinet was to get enough vaccines for everyone during a global pandemic. Turns out that might be the easy job.
As Minister of National Defense,
she's now being asked to help change the culture in an institution riddled with allegations of sexual misconduct.
We know there is a crisis within the culture in our Canadian Armed Forces.
I am thorough, I am determined, I am dogged, and I am results-oriented, and I will be dedicating all of my energies towards this task.
Anand is one of 3 women Trudeau has asked to serve in his government's most senior roles. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland will lead the post-COVID economic recovery as Minister of Finance. Melanie Joly is the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, a major promotion after strong performances as a key Quebec organizer during the last 2 elections.
Oh my God.
But in cabinet making, no promotion comes without a demotion. Marc Garneau, the former Foreign Affairs Minister, is out of cabinet entirely. Harjit Sajjan moved from defense to international development.
I think everyone knows that cabinet making requires difficult choices.
An easier choice, perhaps, in environment, where longtime environmental activist Stephen Guilbeault is the new minister, forming a tandem with his predecessor Jonathan Wilkinson, who moves to natural resources, where they will jointly push an aggressive climate agenda.
They want us to do more, they want us to go faster, and we need to do that by working together.
And working with some cabinet newcomers like Sean Fraser from Nova Scotia, Pascal Saint-Onge from Quebec, Marcy Ian from Ontario, and Randy Boissonnault from Alberta. Additions because along with Garneau, re-elected ministers Jim Carr and Bardish Chagger were also dropped from cabinet. Decisions Trudeau didn't want to address.
Today, this cabinet is the news of the day.
Okay, so David, cabinet is chosen. What's next for this government?
Well, Andrew, the focus now is on delivering on election promises. They created a new housing minister today. Ahmed Hussein is in that role, and I'm told to expect quick action from him on housing affordability. And then next month, Parliament resumes. Expect legislation on banning conversion therapy, protecting healthcare workers from protesters, and getting 10 days of paid sick leave for federally regulated workers.
Okay, David Cochrane, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you heard a few moments ago from Stephen Guilbeault. Later in the program, I'll speak with the new Environment and Climate Change Minister with just a few days to go until the start of the UN Climate Conference in Glasgow. Well, new names were attached to 2 other key portfolios today, Crown Indigenous Relations and Indigenous Services. Experienced ministers moving into both roles. Olivia Stefanovic explains.
A partial overhaul to repair a relationship at the center of this government's mandate. Mark Miller takes over Crown Indigenous Relations from Carolyn Bennett.
L'Honorable Patricia Rideau.
While Patty Rideau moves from health to Miller's old job, Indigenous Services.
I, Carolyn Bennett.
Bennett remains in cabinet, but in a newly created role, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health.
That's wonderful. It's great to have an ally there.
The shakeup is going over well with many Indigenous leaders.
Those relationships are really important, and continuity of some of these faces is important to us because that's really key in relationship building.
It's actually a welcome change. I think that Minister Miller has exhibited tremendous work ethic, some tremendous goodwill.
But they say the federal government needs to continue building trust.
The Prime Minister himself, has made certain statements. There's no relationship greater than this one. Well, then prove it.
Miller says he intends to do just that.
This relationship started with land. The relationship has been broken because of land theft, and it's time to give land back.
So it really does matter what they do, not less than what they say.
For some, that means promising to end the legal fight against a landmark human rights tribunal ruling to compensate Indigenous children.
You cannot reconcile when you're fighting this generation of kids.
Ottawa has until end of day Friday to decide whether to appeal a federal court ruling on the case. The government isn't yet saying what it will do. The choice could set the tone for the new cabinet's relationship with Indigenous peoples. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, and something you may have missed during today's proceedings, that prominent painting seen behind Governor General Mary May Simon is a brand new addition to Rideau Hall. It's the work of renowned Quebec artist Jean-Paul Riopelle. At 4 by 5 meters, it is the largest he ever painted, which is probably why it took what seemed like a small army to assemble it inside the hall. Okay, we are going to switch topics for now, but not for long. Rosie and At Issue will be here in about 20 minutes with their takes on the new cabinet. But let's turn now to the COVID situation in this country. Officials in BC are planning to make booster shots available to everyone over 12 years old by next year. It is the first province to make such an announcement. Brady Strachan has those details.
As British Columbians head into the winter months, public health officials here have got their eyes on the future.
Most of us have good, strong protection, and we don't need a booster dose right now. But come next spring, it is something that we should consider for longer-term protection.
BC is the first province in Canada to announce third-dose vaccinations to the broader public. The province has already been giving them to people who are immunocompromised and residents in long-term care homes. Between now and the end of the year, the province will offer them to people living in rural Indigenous communities, people aged 70 and over, and some healthcare workers. Then, starting in January, anyone can get a booster shot 6 to 8 months after their second dose.
I think it's forward-looking. It shows some element of leadership, and I suspect that other provinces will follow and announce similar programs.
Nearly 90% of eligible people in BC have received a first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. 85% are fully vaccinated. Many British Columbians welcome the booster shot plan.
Get your flu shot and get your third vaccine, and we should be good to go.
I think you'll have a good group that will say, okay, yeah, I just want to get the third dose just so it would make me feel safer.
I'm definitely all for it. It's as soon as we can get all vaccinated even more, it's just keep us all healthy and safe, and that's the key thing, just to get back to normality.
No matter which vaccines they got for their first 2 shots, British Columbians will receive an mRNA dose of Pfizer or Moderna as their booster. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna, British Columbia.
The U.S. is one step closer to approving COVID vaccines for children 5 to 11 years of age. An advisory panel with the Food and Drug Administration has unanimously endorsed a smaller dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for that age group. The full FDA and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, though, still need to approve it. Well, a long-term care home in London, Ontario, has been charged in connection with a COVID-19 outbreak that led to the death of a registered nurse. Kensington Village is accused of misleading health inspectors and not providing proper training for staff. The home's operators now face 3 charges under Ontario's Occupational Health and Safety Act. Well, even before the pandemic, the Ontario government had scaled back proactive inspections in long-term care homes. Today, a reversal by that same government. But Why now, and is it enough? Katie Nicholson takes a look.
Maureen McDermott can't even remember how many complaints she filed while her mother was in long-term care.
It was non-accessible for wheelchairs. My mom almost did a header out of her chair and into the door. It was so bad, the gap. Comprehensive.
Of all the complaints she filed, how many does she believe should have been caught by a provincial inspection?
Pretty much all of them. Every one of them.
After a CBC News Marketplace investigation found that under the Ford government, proactive long-term care home inspections all but ground to a halt before the pandemic and were replaced by a complaint-driven system, the then minister insisted that change had nothing to do with soaring COVID deaths in the sector.
That is a red herring.
Health and safety inspectors.
But today, new minister with a new message. Inspections are key to safety.
We're investing $20 million to hire just under 200 new inspection staff by the fall of 2022.
That nearly doubles the current number of inspectors, who the minister says will perform proactive inspections.
Bringing them back, obviously, is an admission of wrongdoing. Better late than never, I guess.
Advocates say inspections alone aren't enough.
You have to have significant penalties with teeth.
This is a change to our inspection regime.
Those penalties will be announced Thursday.
The big change I'm hoping is going to be the actual laying of charges. We haven't seen that.
But not-for-profit homes worry the focus on inspections takes away from other problems, like understaffing.
The sector has been historically under-resourced and underfunded. The money hasn't flowed yet.
That may be, but Maureen McDermott believes more eyes on the inside is a good thing.
Absolutely. You start with these inspections and make them weekly.
Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
2 weeks after Iqaluit's water supply was put under a do not drink advisory, the source of the contamination is more clear. The city is pointing to an underground fuel spill. But as Juanita Taylor shows us, Iqaluit's problems run even deeper.
It's just what city officials suspected. An old fuel tank rusted out underground next to the water treatment plant.
So the source of the contamination was located in a spill.
But the city still doesn't know when Iqaluit will get clean water running out of their taps again.
Having to use a lot of water, you realize how much water you use daily for cooking, baking, to wash hands. It's like living on the land.
Melia Tikigvik has been getting that water from the river. This single mom of 2 boys is expecting another child this spring.
Taking a shower sometimes, especially when I smell it, but I have no choice. I really hope they get this fixed.
But the water crisis points to a much wider problem in Iqaluit. It's aging, crumbling infrastructure.
The city spends a lot of money every year on fixing pipes, fixing leaks, and replacing old pipes. The city needs a long-term water supply.
The city has recently applied for $180 million to support its long-term water strategy.
But the fact is, we shouldn't be in this situation. The federal government has always said pretty words don't fix situations. Throwing a little bit of money for Band-Aid solutions, Band-Aids fall off.
The new minister in charge of Northern Affairs is promising long-term solutions.
We have Canada's largest infrastructure program in history, and I'm looking forward to working with the city.
The city still has to complete a flushing program to make sure all the contaminants are out of its pipes, and more water testing.
We want to remove the do not consume order as soon as we can, but we need to be certain that it's safe.
Melia Tikigvik is staying patient.
One of the things I know that's not going to stop me is baking, because I love doing that over the weekend.
But she says she wonders if the state of emergency was happening in southern Canada, clean water would be flowing through the taps by now. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Iqaluit.
To Alberta now, where the results are out for last week's referendum on equalization payments. Almost 62% of Albertans voted to remove equalization from the Constitution.
This is a powerful statement today, a democratic statement where Albertans
are demanding to be respected.
So Jason Kenney says he plans to move ahead with the process for a constitutional amendment. However, experts say there's virtually no chance there will be any changes because it would require federal approval and support from other provinces. As for moving to permanent daylight saving time, that was a much closer result. 50.2% of Albertans voted against it. Well, it is early in the NHL season, but there's been a dramatic development off the ice. It involves Chicago's team, a long-standing investigation, and lingering questions about what comes next. Cameron McIntosh explains.
It's over! Patrick Kane has scored the goal!
On the ice in 2010, that goal gave Chicago its first Stanley Cup in 49 years. Off the ice, team executives were trying to manage a crisis. A sexual assault complaint against video coach Brad Ulrich made by a player known as John Doe. Their decision, deal with winning the Stanley Cup first, Aldrich second.
What is clear is that after being informed of Aldrich's alleged sexual harassment and misconduct with a player, no action was taken for 3 weeks.
As the Hawks celebrated their Cup win, Aldrich was alleged to have committed another assault against an intern. He resigned. It stayed quiet for a decade. Today, an NHL investigation sparked by 2 lawsuits earlier this year found the Hawks violated their policies and the NHL's.
And the executives of this organization put team performance above all else. John Doe deserved better from the Blackhawks.
General Manager Stan Bowman has resigned. The team has announced it's being fined $2 million. The story might not end there. The report also questions former coach Joel Quenneville, now with Florida, and former assistant general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff, now general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, who previously denied any knowledge.
It's a really bad day. There's no question about that.
Elliot Friedman is an analyst on Hockey Night in Canada. He calls this damaging in a sport that has made much about taking harassment seriously.
Until we get some clarity on it, I don't think that those stories are going to go away at all.
Author Jasvina Shaw has written on hockey culture.
This is just kind of what we accept as the norm. Basically that you should do whatever you're told to do and not question it.
In statements released by their teams, both Quenneville and Cheveldayoff say that they're cooperating and reserving comment until after meeting with NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, who says he's reserving judgment on further action, if any. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Stranded Afghans, including interpreters who helped the Canadian military, are living in terror under Taliban rule. Evan Dyer has the details of a Canadian mistake that could make things even worse. The circulation of hundreds of names, emails, even photos of those looking to escape.
The Taliban say they're not interested in reprisals, but the facts on the ground belie that claim.
My office has received credible allegations of reprisal killings.
The UN says revenge is widespread. Among those in hiding, the sister of this Toronto man whose identity we're concealing for her protection.
They killed her husband and she cannot look eye to eye to them. And she's trying to hide herself. And then this.
This was one of 4 emails sent by Canada's Immigration Department to vulnerable Afghans looking to escape the Taliban. They were sent to reply all, meaning the Taliban only needs to get 1 email to see everyone on the list, both names and faces in many cases, including this man's sister.
This can put lots of vulnerable people at further risk of being targeted, being arrested, or even being killed by the Taliban, who do not want people to be in touch with the foreigners.
The same thing happened last month in Britain, prompting a swift and public response.
It was brought to my attention at 2000 hours last night there'd been a significant data breach. To say, Mr. Speaker, I was angered by this was an understatement, and I immediately directed an investigation to take place.
The Canadian League is even bigger, several hundred names. The Canadian government didn't acknowledge its mistake publicly, but instead had a public servant send an apology letter to those affected, asking them to delete their emails. Not great news for a new immigration minister on his first day in office.
There have already been information that's been compromised. It's something that I'm going to look at with the department when I meet with them immediately following this press conference.
The response should include helping those who were exposed, says this advocate.
If you have leaked their data, then you're contributing to putting their safety, at risk, and that Canada needs to take some steps to expedite their process.
In the meantime, it's extra fear and anxiety for several hundred very vulnerable people. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Chelsea, Quebec.
Well, a Japanese princess gave up her royal status and money to marry for love. Coming up, we'll tell you why the decisions caused some anger and commotion. Plus,
what I have right now as an extraordinary team that is reinvigorated.
Trudeau does an overhaul of cabinet. What do the moves signal? Rosie and the At Issue panel are here, and we are 100 days out from the Winter Olympics in Beijing. The new gear is out, but questions remain whether athletes should show up.
We're really concerned about what we see going on in the host country.
We're back in 2. Well, Queen Elizabeth has canceled plans to go to Glasgow on Monday, where she was scheduled to attend the UN climate conference. Instead, she will deliver a recorded video message. Buckingham Palace says she is following medical advice to rest. Last week, the Queen spent a night in hospital, for which very few details have been released. Well, Japan's Princess Mako has married a commoner and left the royal family. As Lindsay Duncombe tells us, their love has to conquer some pretty strong public opposition.
There was no pomp, little ceremony, just a news conference and a pledge of love. Kai means everything to me, Japan's now former Princess Mako told reporters. This marriage is needed for us to live and cherish our feelings. You only live once, her new husband said. I want to be with the person I love. Kai Kumura was a commoner. The couple met at school, and in order to be married, Mako had to leave the Japanese royal family because she's a woman, and that's the way it works in Japan.
Princess Mako's marriage will reopen the conversation about those gender issues within the royal family.
Women are not in the Japanese line of succession. By law, the emperor has to be a man. Like an aunt before her, Mako renounced her title and gave up a fortune, turning down a traditional payment of more than $1 million.
It was a big deal. Everybody says that, this is like Japanese version of Harry and Meghan's story.
And just like that royal couple, this is a love story steeped in suffering. The princess was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after intense media scrutiny focused on Kumaro and his family. For example, when he showed up at the airport with a ponytail, the media pounced.
It was unheard of. And he was just, a long-haired hippie, sort of the similar kind of commentary was floating around. He has since lost the ponytail.
Some traditionalists protested the marriage.
People fear the image of the royal family will be sullied. I have a hard time feeling genuinely happy for them.
The couple will live in New York, where he practices law and where the spotlight won't be as intense. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Next on The National, Rosie's here with a special Tuesday at Issue. Rosie.
Hey, Andrew, tonight we're obviously going to talk about some of the promotions in cabinet, like this one.
I'm honored that the Prime Minister has asked me to take on this role.
That and more coming up with Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine. See you soon.
What I have right now as an extraordinary team that is reinvigorated, that is ready to step up and fight for the big things for Canadians is a team that I'm very, very much looking forward to working with.
The Prime Minister unveiled a significant overhaul to his cabinet today. Some new faces, some familiar ones, and others missing entirely. So what message did the government send with this cabinet? Let's bring in At Issue for a special Tuesday edition. Thanks again for being here. You were with me throughout the day, and you're here again tonight. Elamine, I'm going to start with you about the messaging here. In terms of a third mandate, what kind of message do you think he wanted to send, the Prime Minister, with the picks today?
If we can remember back to the election, which we were told is the most important since World War II, I was hoping to see a cabinet that maybe matches that same kind of promise. And I don't think we saw that. Some of that, certainly some significant changes in terms of having a new minister of housing. That is significant. That is, they've signaled that this is a priority for them, and they're going to go there. A new minister of mental health and addictions. That is also significant because this is a government that's talked about mental health since, I don't know, back in the dinosaur age when they were first elected. So like now it seems like it's getting its own portfolio. That is something that is significant. But also, generally speaking, you're not really seeing this big shakeup that I would have assumed would end up happening here. This was a lot of very familiar faces just kind of moved around.
Althea, what do you make of it?
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think this is a government that is trying to signal that it wants to get big stuff done. Big stuff on the environment. Stephen Guilbeault is a polarizing figure for many conservatives, actually for every conservative I could think of, in the environment portfolio. And he's almost like a god to some in the environmental movement that are just so thrilled to have him in that portfolio. The fact that Jonathan Wilkinson is going to natural resources is a very different tone the government is striking than having Seamus O'Regan in that portfolio, and I do not think we need to underestimate that. The fact that Jean-Yves Duclos is going to health, that Carolyn Bennett is taking mental health over to health also signals the big things the government wants to get done on that file. And then I would say reconciliation is the big thing with Mark Miller taking over what was kind of like a sleeper portfolio under Minister Bennett. Crown and Indigenous relations is going to be quite important. And the other thing is they're kind of trying to patch and fix some holes, notably Anita Anand at National Defense.
Okay, lots to chew on there. Andrew, what did you take away from the cabinet itself?
Well, the first takeaway is all must have prizes. This is a cabinet of 39 people. And we're only at the start of the government. They tend to expand over time. So we may be setting some records before we're through with this. To give you an idea of this, we have a Minister of Economic Development. We also have a Minister of Rural Economic Development. And we have 6 other ministers in charge of various regional economic development agencies. The track record of governments on economic development isn't great to begin with, but I don't think that amount of overlap and infighting is really conducive to it. But when you start out, you've got to divide the pie in so many different ways. The greatest common denominator of all those fractions becomes a very large number. Secondly, I think there is a detectable shift to the left here, or more activism, if you will. It was mentioned with Guilbeault going to environment, but Jean-Yves Duclos at health signals, and you can see it in their platform, that the Liberals intend to be quite activist and quite in the province's faces on healthcare. Probably good that they have a Quebec minister handling that.
Chantal.
I agree. The thing that struck me most, but taking a distance from the immediate, was finance, foreign affairs, national defense, Treasury Board. There has never been a federal cabinet where power is shifted to women ministers in all of the cabinets that I've covered federally. And that is more important, I think, than the numbers game of are there as many women as there are men? Because at the end of the day, what matters is who is in a position of influence. It's hard to imagine a cabinet where more women are in serious positions of influence than this cabinet.
Okay.
So that would be my main takeaway. I also don't think they're going left. I think that when they appoint Stephen Guilbeault and Wilkinson jointly on those files, they are, or Duclos for a more proactive health position on federal provincial take. They are basically fulfilling what they told Canadians that they would do in the election.
You talked about the Minister of National Defense, Anita Anand. She's taking over that role, the first woman of color to have it, the first woman to have it since 1993. She did talk a little bit about what she's bringing to that role. Let me show you this.
The fact that I'm a woman is, I guess, one aspect of that calculation, but there are other areas of expertise that I will also be imparting to my role, including my expertise in governance and my knowledge of law and process.
I found that answer really interesting, Elamine, because she's obviously given this some thought over the past however many days she's known about the things she can bring to bear in terms of her own career and her background.
She's also, obviously pushing back against an early anxiety, which is, okay, you're going to bring in a woman into this role in a department that needs a lot of overhaul and needs a lot of thinking about how they're going to tackle the sexual assault and sexual harassment crisis in there. Is she going to be set up to fail in some kind of way? And I think she's sort of getting ahead of that question by saying, this is an area that I do have some expertise in, and I'm going to be able to handle it. I'm not sure that it's going to sort of extinguish those questions because, once again, like we haven't seen the mandate letters just yet. But one thing that is kind of an early flag at this point is, okay, you have a minister in this role. We're all familiar with like the concept of the glass cliff, which is when you set up a woman in a very high, position and say, okay, this is your mess to clean it up, but not give her necessarily, the support and power to do something about it. And like that is a real worry heading into this thing because this has been a problem for how many years now, right?
Yeah. Talk about that, Althea, but also the promotion for Melanie Joly, because that is quite a recovery and quite a fast recovery for her in terms of her career.
Yeah, let me start with Anita Anand. First of all, the woman's smart. And it's not just that she is trying to fight back the narrative that's being created that she's only there because she's a woman, but she needs to tell the people in the department that she is not just there because she is a woman, right. And that she has the skill set to be able to push back against some of the advice that she's getting or some of the early battles that she may have. And so I think that that was very good framing on her part in that question. For Melanie Joly to be appointed Foreign Affairs Minister, I think we talked about it earlier today, but this is the hugest promotion, I think, in this entire cabinet. She was appointed back in 2015 to be Heritage Minister. Kind of all the ambition and the youthful exuberance of the Trudeau government, back when they were at like 60% in public opinion polls. She did not have an easy ride in the Heritage Department, in part because she bungled to file Netflix tax. I've been told not to speak too much. So in any case, it's just that she went from here to here and then a little bit lower. And now she's getting this huge plump job. And it will be very interesting to see if this is kind of although the Prime Minister said he intends to fight the next election, if this is just a laying of the cards for who, Anita Anand has leadership ambitions, Melanie Joly has leadership ambitions, François Champagne has leadership ambitions, Chrystia Freeland has leadership ambitions, and now they're all given these plump posts.
It's not that I don't want you to talk. I just need everyone to be more succinct.
I appreciate.
Andrew, on those two or others that you want to talk about.
Well, I think Anand's statements were well taken, in part because the Defense Department has a lot more problems than just the sexual misconduct mess, as bad as that is. And one of them is the procurement mess. So what I hope, one of the things she brings to it is her experience at procurement. That if she wanted to tackle just as much of a mess, it would be trying to clean that up. She is universally well regarded by everybody I've talked to, and I think her skills and background speak for themselves. The Joly appointment is a little bit more of a head scratcher. I would not say she's had a particularly successful run in her ministerial post prior to this. People have been talking about, well, she was the co-chair of the national election campaign, but that campaign was a bit of a mess. They came in with a 12-point lead in the polls and ended up 1 point behind. So exactly what recommends her for this kind of promotion is not exactly clear. But it may be that the post itself is not quite the post it once was. This will be the fifth foreign affairs minister in the last 6 years. This may be one of those things where the foreign affairs minister is really the prime minister.
Chantal?
Anand will only succeed if Justin Trudeau is behind her, and I don't think that he has a choice anymore because this has become one of the files upon which he will be judged, and not whoever is the minister in cleaning up the act over there. So on that basis, I am not terribly worried about her, but I do note, looking at the Joly's appointment and other appointments today, that this is a prime minister who likes to operate within a zone of comfort. And a lot of the people who were appointed to key portfolios related to his legacy operate within that zone of comfort.
Yeah, that's an awfully good point. Just quickly, for all of you, is there someone that you are going to be watching, someone who could make a mark here beyond the people we've mentioned, either a new face or a face that's moved into a different job? Elamine, you want to start?
Sure. I'll start with Sean Fraser. I think it's a really interesting appointment for him to be Minister of Immigration. He's, of course, he's been around since 2015, well liked by the rest of the caucus, but this is the first time in cabinet, and he's going to a file that is a sensitive file at the moment, particularly because Canada needs to resettle a lot of people from Afghanistan, and they need to move on that very quickly. So that's what I'm watching closely, because I think it's like a pretty significant file to give to a rookie cabinet minister, but let's see what happens.
Okay, I need everyone to go fairly quickly here through it. Althea.
I I would say Dominic LeBlanc. We haven't talked about him yet. He's getting infrastructure along with intergovernmental affairs. A lot of Liberals mocked Stephen Harper for those signs that suggested the Canada's action plan. You remember those?
Yes.
But they feel like they have missed the ball on actually giving the federal government's story about how great the investments the Liberal government has made. And I think that if they're going to change strategy, perhaps Dominic LeBlanc is the guy to do it.
Andrew.
Well, I hope the appointment of Pablo Rodriguez at Heritage signals a shift in strategy on the internet regulation bills, the battery of different pieces of legislation the government's been bringing forward, which have raised a lot of alarm among experts in the field, including previous chairman of the CRTC, that it's overreach, it's overly intrusive, et cetera. So hopefully he'll have the opportunity to take a step back and maybe rethink those.
And Chantal, last word.
I also had Pablo Rodriguez for the same reasons, and he's going to be watched very closely in Quebec, where there was a lot of support for those initiatives that Stephen Guilbeault is leaving behind. But also Mark Holland, who becomes the leader of the government and the House, which is a central place if anything is going to happen in a minority parliament.
Okay. That was great. You all said things that you hadn't said all through the day with me. You all said new things, so thank you for doing that. Good to see you all, and I'll see you back here on Thursday. Thanks, everybody. Now it's back to Andrew in Toronto.
Thank you very much, Rosie. And as Althea mentioned, the pick for environment is a polarizing one.
The Honourable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
His critics say his climate activist roots make him a bad choice. I will speak with Minister Guilbeault to get his response next.
Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
It is a big shift in Trudeau's new cabinet. Stephen Guilbeault as Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. And the timing is important. We are just days away from the upcoming UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. So let's speak with Minister Guilbeault himself. Congratulations, first of all, Minister.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
So, hey, you're not going to have a whole lot of time to waste, right? COP26 in Glasgow coming up. What's one concrete thing we can expect from Canada on that particular world stage?
Well, the presidency of the conference, the UK government, has asked Canada to co-chair a working group on a very important element of the negotiations, which is a commitment that industrialized countries made in 2009 in Copenhagen to provide $100 billion per year of funding to help developing countries face climate change, basically. And unfortunately, we the industrialized world, we haven't met that promise yet, but my predecessor, my colleague and friend, Minister Wilkinson, has been asked by the UK presidency to co-chair a working group to land this money. And that's a very important element for dozens and dozens of countries around the world, developing countries who look to us to help them face the impacts of climate change, because frankly, over the years, they haven't contributed.
Alberta's Premier, Jason Kenney, is already on record as saying your appointment is problematic because he wonders whether you're capable of taking an approach to climate change that also preserves jobs. I mean, what should he and the rest of us understand about how you are going to approach this portfolio?
If you look at what's happening right now on the world stage, investors are moving away from fossil fuels and investing in clean technologies, in renewable energy. The economy of the future will be a green economy. And what we've heard during the last election from coast to coast to coast is that people care deeply about what's happening to our planet, and they care deeply about climate change. The new mayor of Calgary, one of her first order of business will be to declare a climate emergency. So it's not just in Quebec, it's not just in British Columbia, but throughout the country, people are very concerned, and they're demanding that their governments, and certainly including the federal government, do more in the fight against climate change. But we need to do this in a way that makes sense, obviously. And I will be happy to work with Alberta, with Premier Kenney, and with all the other provinces and territories and municipalities and business sector and the civil society to ensure that we do this wisely in a way that makes sense for people, for our communities, but also for the sake of our children and for the sake of our environment.
Minister, I'm afraid we're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, though, for this opportunity to chat. And once again, congratulations on the appointment.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Okay, next on The National, we're going to get a look at what Team Canada will be sporting at the Winter Olympics in Beijing. But some are calling for a boycott. We'll tell you what athletes think next. Team Canada unveiled its new Olympic look today, a collaboration with Lululemon. It affects everything the athletes wear in the opening and closing ceremonies and on the podiums. And it's a big change from the past 16 years, during which the Hudson's Bay Company has dressed Canada's athletes. And don't look now, we are just 100 days out from the Winter Games. Jamie Strachan looks at how athletes and organizers are feeling.
New Team Canada uniforms today for a Winter Games in a country still fending off old criticisms.
We're really concerned about what we see going on in the host country.
And yet, talk of a Beijing boycott has faded. The Canadian Olympic Committee was the first to say that keeping athletes home wouldn't improve human rights in China or prompt democratic reforms.
We're part of the Olympic movement and part of the bringing together of 206 countries in the peaceful sporting competition of the Olympic Games, and that's what we think is what we have to focus on.
A golden moment! The focus for athletes like freestyle skier Cassie Sharp winning medals at events they have trained their whole lives for.
Cassie Sharp taking gold medal.
It's challenging for us because we're not politicians, we're not the government, we don't know how to help. All we can do is support and come out and be athletes and do what we're meant to do.
That has been the COC's message to athletes. Make the best of things.
It's not their fault, let's say, that the Olympic Games are taking place in a country over which they had no choice. But we're telling them to focus on the Games, to express themselves if they feel troubled by where they're taking place.
China stepped up to host these games when few other countries wanted them. Beijing will become the first city to host both summer and winter games. Just don't expect it to prompt change in China.
China has suffered a lot of bad press and it wants to look strong. And I think hosting the Olympic is an opportunity for the regime to project its power domestically as well as internationally.
Yeah, Cassie! None of that will be top of mind for Canada's 228 athletes. They'll be on the hills and in arenas pursuing their Olympic dreams. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, tonight we say goodbye to a longtime and trusted voice of CBC News. Carole MacNeil has signed off one last time after a 34-year career in broadcast journalism.
Carole MacNeil, CBC News, Fredericton.
She got her start in New Brunswick in the late 80s and quickly became a rising star in Atlantic media. That propelled her to Ontario and eventually landing at CBC headquarters in Toronto.
The National with Evan Solomon and Carole MacNeil.
Good evening, everyone.
She would go on to report from the U.S. and Afghanistan, interviewing high-profile guests and hosting multiple national programs on the CBC. Tonight, she signed off one last time from our airwaves.
I thank you for sharing your stories and opinions with me and allowing me to serve you for so long. I'll miss you.
We will miss you too, Carole. Next on The National, Calgary using a bit of humor to keep you safe on the road. And it's all thanks to one engineer, the highway signs, and the brains behind them. They're our moment next. Well, it all started with this highway sign, and it's thanks to an engineer that used his wit to get drivers to pay attention. Joseph Cruz works for Calgary's Transportation Department. He's new to the job, but already making his mark, one digital highway sign at a time. His humor is our moment.
It's surreal. It really is surreal. The first week we did it, the Baby Yoda message was like just an overwhelmingly positive response. And aside from just like the response at all, even just driving to work that day and seeing it up on the board, I was like, that it actually happened. Wow, it's there. We did it. Anybody who knows me finds me probably an annoyingly punny person. And my direct manager was just like on board right from the start. So it kind of became our own little project. I wouldn't have thought that it would reach so many people so impressively. I have never heard of somebody look forward to a Tuesday morning rush hour commute. That is just not a thing. Except now it kind of is, which is like just a totally rewarding side of it.
So this was apparently a 6-month pilot project that ended today, in fact, but it has become such a huge success that they've begun almost crowdsourcing these kind of punny messages, and people have been sending them in. They've got hundreds, a backlog of hundreds to use apparently, and they do plan to use them. But listen, those who know me know I don't like puns. I think they're unnecessary. But you're not a bee, don't drive buzzed. Ain't bad. That's The National for October 26th. Have a great night.